Great. Welcome everybody. So glad that you're all here. I'm really excited about this because this has been on my wish list, to-do list for quite some time, and have been finding that many municipalities have been starting to dust off their green roof conversations and identifying what they're going to be doing moving forward. Just a little bit of background. I know for the longest time, green roofs as an authority was in the City of Toronto Act, and the City of Toronto had those authorities, but it wasn't in the Municipal Act. Having said that, the Municipal Act was updated in 2017, and that provided municipal authorities on green roofs, cool roofs, alternative roof surfaces, authorities to municipalities. Many municipalities that are advancing green roof interventions are using their green standards to advance those green roof uptake. But green roof bylaws would definitely be a much more effective way, because a lot of the times in green development standards thus far, the green roof are part of the voluntary mechanisms that municipalities metrics that developers can choose from. And there has been a limited uptake on green roof metrics within voluntary green standards thus far. So I know that a number of municipalities have been having conversations internally about what do they want to do to drive increased uptake to green roof installations. And I know that a number of you have reached out to me saying, hey, look, there's a lot of questions we have about green roofs. We don't always understand all the technical aspects of it. What makes it work for a site? What doesn't make it work? All of those different types of questions. And I wasn't sure who to call on to help answer some of those questions. So I reached out to Paul Frith, who has been really helpful in helping me navigate the clean tech world and the developer world. And Paul introduced me to Christian, and Christian from Ginkgo Sustainability will be doing the presentation and answering all your questions. And for those of you who put questions in that you really wanted to see raised in the registration, the webinar registration, I've provided those to Christian, but there will be ample time to do Q&A during the presentation moving forward as well. So just before I turn it over to Christian, I did want to do a land acknowledgements. So the Clean Air Partnership acknowledges that the stolen land on which we operate is the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And through our work, we are committed to trying to disrupt ongoing approaches to climate governance that reproduce settler colonial relations and systematically exclude Indigenous peoples from policy making. And then just actually one of the things I realized when I was doing my sharing, give me one sec, I did not share audio, so I will be doing that again and sharing the audio so that I can share something. So bear with me and don't judge my screen. So I'm going to just turn this on. I'm hoping everybody can see my screen. And
we don't have Indigenous people don't have a good dealings with police officers, with residential schools, and with systemic racism and all that things that have happened over the number of years. So my goal is to try and build those bridges so the two can have some kind of meeting ground in the middle there, and I can work with both communities. As we all know that we
And one of the things I found really great about that sharing, that is a video of that was a video of an Indigenous liaison person with the City of Hamilton's police department. And it's one of the first examples of a liaison who is going to be working with Hamilton Police Services to undertake training and do liaison with the community to try and build some opportunities for increased dialogue and understanding between the two communities, which I thought was really, really interesting and a really good example of reconciliation in action. So I just wanted to kind of highlight as an example of rather to go beyond just land acknowledgements to see exactly what is it that we can do and what is taking place to advance reconciliation. And I'll turn it over to Christian. And you should be able to just share your screen now, Christian, and you'll just need to unmute. Perfect. I see your screen.
Unmute. Thank you, everyone, for having me today. I'm looking forward to talking about green roofs. All about green roofs. Today, we're going to brief introduction about myself and where I come from. We'll cover what is a green roof, go through some of the benefits, some common misconceptions, discuss performance briefly, briefly discuss green roofs and solar, and then the meat of the presentation will discuss sort of what the aim of policy is and some of the options for realizing some of those components. And I'll share some resources with you, and we'll have a Q&A. Christian Mahlstedt. I'm the founder and president of Ginkgo Sustainability. We're a green roof, living wall, design, build, maintain firm based in Toronto. It was founded in 2010. We added an office in BC in 2021 and consist of 50 plus full-time and full-time seasonal staff, both union and non-union, maintaining just under 4 million square feet of green roof this coming season. We are heavily involved in the industry via the North American industry body, Green Roof for Healthy Cities, and most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with. Sit on the WALS committee, the maintenance committee, involved in creation of the GRP and the Green Roof Professional, and then the Green Roof Installation and Maintenance Professional programs. And I'm the treasurer of the board of directors. Briefly, covering, just to lay a bit of a groundwork, what is a green roof? A green roof is a specialized roofing system that supports vegetation growth on rooftops. Sounds simple. It is relatively simple, actually. Green roofs are often talked about in terms of type and extensive, semi-intensive, and intensive. And basically, the extensive is the simplest type of green roof system you can have, lightest weight, typically lower cost, and is designed primarily to deliver on a reduced set of performance metrics. Stormwater management, contributes to sound dampening, urban heat island, etc., but it doesn't do that as well as more in-depth profiles. As the weight of the assembly goes up, that's typically due to the depth of the growing medium, that allows you to have a broader palette of plants to work with, increased performance on some metrics, and as well the price goes up. The pricing you see here is basically a somewhat generic price for each sort of category. It's for a relatively simple low to mid-rise project that's plus minus, let's say 500 square meters. If you were to go really small or really complex, that upper bound would be much higher. For example, if you were to do a small residential green roof, you could easily be at the $50 to $100 a square foot range. If you're talking about, 20 square meters plus minus, or if you're doing a green roof at 50 plus stories or complex project specific conditions, the upper bound would also be significantly higher. And then underlying all of that is what's involved in the green roof. Typically that green roof terminology is just the basic green roof assembly, but if you start incorporating other performance metrics like stormwater detention into the green roof assembly, or blue green roofs, for example, you'd be, let's say, adding an extra $10 plus minus a square foot for adding that capability to a green roof assembly. Just briefly, so that we're all on the same page, for all those of you who are not 100% familiar with green roofs, what are the components of a green roof? Well, first, you start with the non-green roof components. Your structure, that can be a concrete deck, could be a metal deck, could be a wood deck. What the waterproofing for that roofing assembly is. Picture here shows a conventional roofing assembly where the insulation is below the membrane. Could also be a protected membrane roof assembly where the insulation is above. The only difference that creates in this image is where the root barrier sits. It always sits on top of the membrane. And then on top of that, you have some sort of drainage layer built in. That can be a synthetic, plastic-based, dimple drain mesh, more in-depth cup-based system that retains more water, for example. It can also be it could simply be roofing ballast, some types of roof assemblies. And on top of that, you have some sort of filter built into the system to separate the drainage from the media component of the assembly. Your growing medium, with, you can see, as you saw in the slide before, can range from nothing essentially to multiple feet of media. And then the vegetation, which can vary dramatically. I forgot to mention earlier that the question and answer, if there's something specific, Gabby, can you flag me on
Oh,
a
you don't
slide?
need, yeah, for sure, Christian. If there's any question specific to a slide, I'll make sure to draw your attention to them. You don't have to, I know how hard it is to multitask on looking at chats and presents. You don't need to worry about it. I will draw your attention to it. And then anytime people have questions, you can throw it into the chat whenever it comes to mind. We will have lots of time for Q&A after the presentation. Thanks.
You're presuming that I'm going to talk quick enough to give us lots of time. All right. Benefits. Public versus private. I think what sets green roofs apart is that it's a combination of public and private benefits. If you look at other green infrastructure, green building techniques, such solar, for example, or passive house construction, those are, from a societal perspective, beneficial, and the returns are primarily, when you're looking at things from a municipal perspective, they're private benefits. They reduce operating costs or provide benefits primarily to the owner versus to their community that they're in. Green roofs are unique in the sense that they have an impact on the local community, and they provide those benefits not just to a private owner, but that community. Air quality by reducing particulate matter, biodiversity creation, mitigation of urban heat island effect, stormwater management impacts, increased aesthetics and enhanced spaces, are public as well as private. On the private side, you add energy savings, life cycle returns by increasing the life of a roof membrane. That can be, your standard commercial membrane is plus minus these days about 15 years. There's obviously a wide range in there. I mean, there can be roofs that have 25, 30-year lifespans, but by the addition of a green roof, the European experience is showing us you can have triple plus lifespan. So we could be talking about a roof that's roofed once in your lifetime, effectively. Enhanced solar performance and noise dampening on a space. There's a famous example of, I think it's the Gap headquarters in San Francisco, that was in a flight path. So the green roof was used to basically dampen the noise of plane traffic overhead in order to make this, usable as a office space. Here you
Just
can
one
see
question, Christian. Kathy was just wondering, what do you mean by solar performance?
a green roof modulates the temperature in the above the vegetation to, I guess the easiest way of looking at it is if you're walking barefoot on on asphalt versus on grass.
So that would be more like changing the albedo of the rooftop surface, so it doesn't absorb as much on that one. Is that correct?
A part of it is albedo. The other part of it is that evapotranspiration of moisture is bringing down the
Right.
temperature. So if you're in a nutshell, that you can easily have 20+ degree difference between a roof and between the vegetation. And
Gotcha.
electronics, our solar panels performance degrades as temperature goes up. And so there's studies that have shown that the production of solar power can be enhanced by between 5 and 15% by the introduction of vegetated surface underneath them.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. And here you can see some of these impacts. This homeowner has added some biodiversity and nature outside their living spaces, their bedroom windows. This school created a amenity space on a very tight urban site. This is an intensive roof here with some small trees growing on it. And an example of some biodiversity, sandpiper eggs nest, a sandpiper nest with some eggs in it in an urban setting where it can be a safe nesting habitat.
Hey, Christian, you just got another message asking if you can incorporate solar panels and a green roof with a question mark and then shade tolerant plants.
I'll be talking about that a few slides down.
Okay.
Common myths. The building industry is relatively conservative, so I've heard many people mention these over the years. I think maintenance free is somewhat self-inflicted by the industry, trying to convince people that to do green roofs. But maintenance free, no, that doesn't exist. You can have low maintenance though, depending on the nature of the green roof and the project. And one needs to think of a green roof as an asset. It's a capital investment you're making in your building envelope, and they all need maintenance of some sort. And it depends on the benefit that they're providing. So no maintenance is not feasible, but low maintenance is. That they cause leaks, it's a firm no. Green roofs actually protect your membrane, so they shield it from UV and temperature fluctuation, which lengthens the life of the membrane. As well, they can protect a membrane from other external factors. Hail damage. There was a study done not that long ago in Denver, Colorado, after a hailstorm, where they basically did a study of roofs with damage after a hailstorm, and showing that basically green roofs, there was zero damage to the membrane that was covered by vegetation. Another example is bird droppings. As I just found out recently, but the capital district in BC, so Victoria, was having accumulations of bird droppings on their roof membranes that were basically beginning to degrade the membranes and cause issues, and was one of the factors behind their implementation of a number of green roofs, which on those sites they've eliminated the problem, and then the bird droppings actually act as fertilizer for their green roofs, eliminating the damage to the membrane. Green roofs are a fire hazard. No, with a caveat, they need to be maintained. If you think about it, vegetation, it's like a piece of paper. It can light on fire relatively easily, but it has a really low embodied energy. Burns out very quickly. Whereas asphalt or synthetic based products, they they have a high embodied energy. So they're if they light on fire, it's difficult to put out. As well, the media typically on green roofs is very hard, as a relatively low organic compound, so it doesn't component, so it doesn't catch the natural fire breaking itself in many ways. The industry has also developed some design guidelines for how to design to minimize the risk of fire through the ANSI is the American National Standards Institute, and SPRI is the Single Ply Roofing Institute, and FLL, which is a German industry body. There are design standards for breaks between combustible surfaces and vegetation, and breaking up vegetation pallets with non-burnable surfaces like walkways, for example. Performance. Green roofs, I mean, we do them for, we're looking for certain performance characteristics. Performance, if you're looking at a green roof, you can have many performance design goals. We'll be looking at stormwater retention, detention, looking at energy savings, biodiversity, maximizing coverage for water balance. All of those are in play on a project, and they provide solutions also. There's different approaches that different disciplines can take to meet their goals. A civil engineer looking at water balance, quality or quantity, landscape architect, the urban planner. Everybody has an interest in what a green roof can do, and then one can take a look at what the goals are on a specific project to design a green roof in a way that maximizes that impact. We're primarily a contractor, although we do engage in some of these conversations, but you are lucky in Ontario to be actually in a hotbed of the industry in North America, with home to a number of manufacturers and a thriving market that a lot of information and expertise is available for designers, not just remotely but locally, to help work out those, develop the right system for the project that you're looking at, and that they're looking at to meet municipal requirements on a site.
Hey, Christian, we have a quick question here, and they're asking, is there a minimum size roof that should be targeted for green roofs, and in brackets balance maintenance costs with enhanced performance?
Yes and no. That's not a very good, that seems like a slimy answer, but I think it depends on the goals of a municipality, or for example, I mean, leaving aside, let's say, private residential homes, we've done something as small as 100 square feet or 10 square meters, ballparkish. But in the sort of the multi-unit residential or commercial space, we've done, let's say, 100 square meter projects, plus minus a little bit. I was just in conversations with my team today on a small 40 square meter project that on a commercial building, through to very large projects. They all have a role to play on a specific project. Obviously, on a small green roof, the economics are different than on a larger green roof. I think it comes down to how you can incorporate or target the performance goals you're looking for. So the City of Toronto is basically saying, if you want a building permit, you need to do a green roof. And these are the coverage requirements that they've laid out. And so you get green roofs of many sizes in that. Personally, I would like to see a mechanism where you maximize the green roof area. I think it provides the biggest bang for one's buck from multiple performance objectives, but I mean the main one is stormwater management. I think it's crazy that you have green roofs at 50 to 70 stories. If one could figure out a transfer mechanism that worked, one could do 2, 3, 4 times that volume of green roof in on a different low-rise building, for example. So yes and no. Depends on how you can fine-tune your policy that meets your local conditions.
And we just got another question. By the way, we also have a bunch of questions on the solar thing, so I think everybody's looking forward to that slide. But this question is wondering what the economic development growth has been as a result of the green roof bylaw Toronto has in place. There's a big connection between the municipalities and growth of the sector, and they were wondering if you could speak to the role that the Toronto green roof bylaw may have played in that.
You're not asking for my personal opinion, I think. I think Toronto has been lucky in the sense that the housing and the commercial market has been booming since 2010 when they implemented the bylaw, and everybody has learned to adapt to it. You have developers don't. I mean, they're obviously looking to minimize their costs, but they're not shying. Most of the bigger developers are not shying away from doing them, and are incorporating it into their cost benefit. Their ROI. It's a cost, but they're also able to use that to promote their units or the features of the amenity spaces and the features of the building. So it hasn't hindered growth, and has delivered, I think, on a lot of the goals that the city is looking for. It would, for example, though, have a huge impact on industrial buildings. I mean, the cost per square foot of a green roof could make up, probably 10% of the cost of a warehouse building, which would definitely change the ROI of those buildings. So you're not, so it would depend on the economics of a logistics warehouse, for example, on whether it makes sense to do the green roof or not do the green roof. And the city of Toronto recognized that in the bylaw by carving out industrial buildings to a different standard than the rest of the buildings that they were looking at meeting. But as you move outside of the city of Toronto, obviously warehouses, they've moved from city of Toronto. The land is in the outer ring of the GTA, so that's where you're finding those warehouses. And I would imagine there would be a up in arms protest if you actually ask them to increase their costs by 10-15% to incorporate green roofs, regardless of the benefits. So the city of Toronto, yes, green roofs has worked for them. Outside of the city of Toronto, I think the policy, the implementation and the policy mix to support that needs to be different than in the center of the in the downtown core of Toronto. Hopefully that answers that question.
It does. Thanks, Christian.
You're welcome. I want to take a look at the main focus of green roofs, which is stormwater retention and detention. And it also illustrates a little bit public versus private. Retention is a blunt tool in some respects. Civil engineers, can't use it to implement, detention on a project. So retention is really the tool that's driven policy globally, and basically is minimizing the annual runoff off of a site or your water balance. And a green roof will hold water until it reaches saturation, at which point it runs off. The water that it captures so retention would be the water that basically evaporates off or evapotranspirates off a roof surface and doesn't enter the system. I believe in the city of Toronto, they allow you to extrapolate, I think, 5 millimeters for a core green roof assembly and your water balance calculations. And then in the Toronto Green Standard, there with certain green roof assemblies and different vegetation types are allowing you to extrapolate 7 or even 10 millimeters. Detention. So here, actually, with retention, you can see that the light blue curve is the volume underneath of it. The retention is the component that the area of the curve has shrunk, and or water balance. And detention is the peak flow delay and the peak flow reduction off of a roof. And there's now via blue-green roofs or passive friction-based green roofs, you can do engineering calculations to provide a quantifiable runoff rate off a roof, for example, and take water out of a cistern or other stormwater solutions and use a green roof as a detention tool. Green roofs and solars, or known as bioroof. I hope this answers most of your questions. There aren't many in the Toronto or in Ontario. There are, I think, only a handful. We have only been involved in a really small one that we've managed, that we did. It's actually the photo you see here. It's a very poor photo of the solar panels. I went through multiple years of maintenance reports, and the technicians always take photos of the plants and not of the panels. This project, a municipality, is a small pilot project that a municipality did. They had done the solar, and then they wanted to do a green roof and incorporated the two. So we had to dismantle the solar panels and reinstall the brackets and for them. I think the challenge with, so green roofs increase the performance of solar, but in the broader framework of our regulatory environment, Ontario, in this case, solar has a high private return on investment, and adding a green roof to that in and of itself reduces that ROI. So it's not, people just don't do it unless they have other reasons for doing it. As well, the core of the green roof market is Toronto because of the bylaw, and in there, the solar, if you're doing solar on a building, it reduces, like it's not counted in the area that you need to incorporate for your green roof coverage. So that also separates the two. What I think going forward is going to impact that is that as water balance calculations for sites become more stringent and more difficult to meet, then someone doing solar would need, I think you'll see the two being forced back together again. That and that the solutions exist. It's, it adds cost in terms of labor and component of labor, let's say. The components would be a little bit of additional cost perhaps as well, but it has benefits that the green roof can act as ballast for the solar, so that you don't need to penetrate your roof membrane, and that the performance, as mentioned earlier, there are studies that have shown the improved solar performance from having a green roof underneath. So the overall ROI is lower, but you get to basically add the public benefits of a green roof to the private benefits of solar. Paul, got me any quick questions on this slide? Or
no, I think that there's some questions. There's definitely some questions, but I think we can wait until at the end of the presentation and get into a Q&A discussion.
Perfect, thank you. So policy tool and frameworks. I wanted to basically lay out from an industry perspective and industry body perspective, sort of what successful green roof policy needs, and then take a look at some ways of achieving that. So you need an objective, and it can be multiple, doesn't have to be just one, but it needs to be clear and concise. You have requirements, whether they're prescriptive or performance-based. It needs to be achievable, realistic, take into account resource availability, both from an installation or, like I say, an industry perspective, but also from the perspective of managing the policy. And the local context needs to be taken into account. What are the opportunities and limitations locally? Here, this table, you can see I think there's 30 plus municipalities now across North America that have some sort of green roof policy. In Canada, in Gatineau, Port Coquitlam, BC, Vancouver's working on one as part of their rainy city strategy. Toronto, Ottawa has announced a draft of a policy. So there are numerous policies. Here are some of the more successful, popular ones in North America. And you can see the objective: sustainable development, stormwater management, biodiversity, marine infrastructure, energy. They're concise, they're simple, and then you have the policies that support that objective. Prescriptive versus performance-based requirements. Prescriptive is, it's a mandate. You have to do it this way. It's the easiest to implement and check, but it also constrains you in many ways. Performance-based, it gives you the goal and then allows for flexibility and innovation on how you address and achieve that. And the Toronto Green Roof Bylaw is actually, I think, really well done from that perspective, North America wide, because it typically allows you to, gives you both. So for example, with growing medium, this is a very crystal clear example. Structurally possible, the growing medium shall be a minimum of 100 millimeters. And is sort of the core minimum standard for a green roof. Or there's a performance-based metric there, that you have an engineered system that provides plant survivability comparable to an unirrigated system with growing medium and 100 million. So that has opened the door to different approaches that don't have 100 millimeter growing medium, but have backing by a manufacturer and case studies, etc., that the city feels comfortable with allowing, because there's different approaches to meeting that. For example, sedums, one can do in less than 100 millimeters, but grasses you couldn't. So there are different ways of skinning a cat, and going performance-based allows you to achieve that. Achievable versus realistic. Green roofs are, you get a lot of pushback because of cost from developers, etc. So I guess the best way of saying it is less is more. If you're trying to maximize the environmental benefits of green roofs, the more we have, the better off we are. So creating a standard that maximizes that, an addressable portfolio of roofs, and minimizes pushbacking. So, having systems that have a light system weight are possible, that are easy installation, low maintenance, economical. That doesn't mean that that's the only green roof, though, you're going to get by the time you layer other things onto that. For example, in Toronto, the green roof bylaw allows you to do the, all four of those are feasible, realistic. But as developers go through, for example, look at the Toronto Green Standard and we're looking for other benefits or approaches to their project from that then starts impacting the type of green roof that they're going to do. And then you do get more intensive, semi-intensive green roof assemblies that are trying to achieve other goals in other areas. So it's not a homogeneous, the simplest green roof solution always wins. It really depends on the overall policy framework or mix of policies that are in place. Using performance-based allows you to have a future-proof policy by letting different ways of fulfilling that requirement evolve over time, making it easier, more achievable. Prescriptive, I think, are great for setting boundary conditions. I highlighted 2 here, but need for leak testing is necessary prior to installation. So you're ensuring that you're minimizing the risk of leak issues and all the headaches that come with that by making sure that construction is done properly. That structural engineer needs to sign off on confirm that the structure of the building can support the weight of a green roof. Something like that really needs to be in place. Doesn't need to be addressed in different ways. All right. Options and tools for policy implementation. If you look at green roof policy across North America, there are a number of different ways, and they're all somewhat different. Green area ratio is one example of providing weightings to different types of green infrastructure and having you need percentage X green area, and then by applying different weights to different elements, a developer is free to meet the targets set in the manner that makes the most sense for that site. It's an approach that Washington, D.C. has chosen, for example. Construction standards. The Toronto Green Roof Bylaw is a great example, for example, of that. It has a construction set guide. This is how you do green roofs, with guidelines explaining how it's done. There's also guidelines to achieve biodiversity. And then from leaving green roofs aside a little, or as taking a bigger picture approach, the Toronto Green Standard is another method for illustrating and basically incorporating multiple green development standards or green infrastructure wishes into one document that will allow you to target different areas for a project, and providing options for meeting requirements. For example, water balance. Developers need to, let's say Toronto, meet a certain water balance, and how they achieve that then is up to them, but they do need to empty their cistern. Well, we can do that with irrigation on a green roof, or they can use water reuse for a toilet. It's not a set path, it varies from one side to the next, but it typically, for example, will encourage a green roof, because green roof irrigation is typically less expensive than plumbing in separate water lines for water reuse in toilets. But it will vary from one building to the next to some degree, and there are projects where people choose to do water reuse for toilets. Funding. From my perspective, there has to be some sort of mandate, I think, typical of some way of setting a baseline. But outside of that, how do you drive or encourage green roofs in specific scenarios? Everybody has specific needs. I think what needs to be found in most situations is some way of creating a transfer mechanism to encourage green roofs on ideal sites projects and versus less ideal sites. The example I gave here, an expensive site, say high rise, are hard to maintain and shift it to a low rise, easy to maintain location, or shifting from locations that are low impact on infrastructure to high impact on infrastructure. and there's multiple, couple examples of this. The Toronto Green Roof, the Eco Roof Incentive Program is one. It's funded by developers that choose to use the buyout mechanism in the bylaw. So they don't do a green roof on their project, but that funds basically double, because the buyout is $200 a square meter in the bylaw, and they're giving $100 a square meter credit to other people, to voluntary projects. The Stormwater Retention Credit Trading Program is the city of DC, Washington, DC. And there, they created a baseline that you have to meet on specific projects, and they determined what they value for a gallon of stormwater. Then, if you create excess retention on a site, in excess of that, you're able to use that as a credit to sell into their marketplace. And then developers who don't want to or are unable to meet the minimum retention requirement are able to buy those credits to fulfill the requirements of their permit on their site. So that is another example of a transfer mechanism to sort of shift projects or green roofs from one location to another. I think all municipalities have localizations like that, where there might be areas that have great infrastructure or where stormwater isn't an issue, but you also have locations where it would be more cost effective to do source control and take rainwater out of the system or not let it enter the system, because the system is, or the infrastructure is overloaded there. So figuring out on a local basis what makes the most sense for you.
Hey, Christian, we're getting to that 10 minutes left
Yep.
kind of
Yeah.
point.
Last slide.
Thank you.
Okay.
Here's just a short list of some resources that'll be in here. Greener for Healthy Cities, the industry body and its sister organization, and the Monitor and Journal for articles and academic research. There's a link to a Drive folder with a bunch of studies and documents that various resources to download. The City of Toronto and the standards setting, the standards organization with the different standards for was mentioned there.
Thanks,
And
Kristen. Oh,
questions and
perfect.
answers.
Excellent. There are quite a few questions, and I just wanted to let everyone know that I will be sending out a copy of the presentation. So all of those resources that Christian highlighted will be available to you. One of the first questions I think will be kind of like, is it like in terms of general lifespan of green roofs, and what happens at the end of a green roof life expectancy, and what is really imperative in terms of extending the life of the green roof?
Effectively maintenance. That's a green roof should outlive all of us if it's maintained. I mean, if you look at a roof is being replaced typically that's 15 years plus minus. I mean, you have membranes on a lot of buildings that are actually lasting longer than that. If you're doubling, tripling, quadrupling that, the green roof is effectively, the roof isn't being replaced, so the green roof should stay in place. So making sure that you maintain your green roofs and avoiding issues with your roofing membrane mean that it's not an issue. So maintenance to minimize the risk of damage to the roofing assembly, for example, tree roots or flooding damage from drains that plug.
And have you been hearing from the developers in terms of like the return on investment of green roofs in terms of extending their lifespan of their roof surfaces, and thereby they bringing that into their business kind of case for green roofs, or not yet?
Not yet. The vast majority of developers are condo, which they don't really care after whatever Terrion runs out, 1 or 2 years. Commercial, I mean, we're at basically this is 14-year mark of the 13-year mark. This is the 14th season of the green roof bylaw being in place. So there are, I guess, maybe some, but they're publicly funded green roofs. Typically in the Toronto, they're maybe 20 years old.
So
Outside
we
of
still
the,
have to get more data before people buy into the life expectancy kind of, okay.
well, I mean, the data exists. If you look further afield, Europe
Mhm.
has 50-plus-year-old green roofs. The At the end of the day, the ROI on a green roof is relatively low from a private perspective. The numbers I've sort of seen are somewhere between 15 and 30 years, depending on utility
Gotcha.
costs and roofing costs, etc. But
So
if
it's
done
really more
right,
about the public benefit it provides in terms of biodiversity, pollinator species, being able to have a pollinator garden, access, like I would assume the building, like if you have public access or occupant access to the green roof, that might help with the developer return on investment or the building owner, because it makes for a more attractive place, certainly with regards to a commercial building and that's or one that's tenanted.
yeah. I mean, if you look at, I live in a condo in Mississauga, and it has a fantastic amenity space, greened. It's a selling point. Or I wouldn't move into a condo building that didn't have that.
Yeah. In
So,
terms,
and then
oh,
stormwater is, I mean, stormwater is a big driver, and that is primarily a public benefit.
mhm.
But the flip side is that, I mean, you need to control it somewhere. So you either, I mean, municipalities need to charge for it somewhere. So whether they charge it in development charges somehow for the infrastructure they need, or they pass those costs on to stormwater through stormwater charges somehow, and
Right.
pass it over the tire rate
Have you
base.
found that the two are kind of in sync with each other, that for municipalities to advance green roof policies, they often have a stormwater fee in place to help kind of offset to provide some incentives rather than doing it from the general tax base? Have you found the two kind of go together?
I don't know enough about outside of Ontario.
Mhm.
In Ontario, no, the only municipality
With
through
Toronto.
its unique sets is Toronto, and the municipalities that have implemented stormwater charges, I haven't seen an increase in green roofs due to that. And I mean, I guess it's early days, but I remember, I'm from Kitchener-Waterloo originally, and they introduced a stormwater charge. But the impact of that stormwater charge, I mean, if the ROI of, okay, yeah, I'll eliminate my stormwater charge by doing a green roof, but I mean,
It's not significant
a
enough to really drive
thousand years before you get it back.
okay. All
So
right.
charges, that they don't quite meet yet. I mean, you can't go from zero to a full basis stormwater charge very quickly. You have to build it in,
Gotcha.
and then scale in the industry. I mean, we are in a region that has scale to some degree, but it's not the scale that, we're not
Mhm.
a full-blown commercial industry in terms of, there's billions of dollars at play.
And
So, I
in
mean,
terms of your and in terms of your experience with the types of buildings and like you mentioned warehouses, them probably not being the most appropriate type of building for a green roof, considering that they're kind of more or less disposable buildings. It like, would you, and you mentioned maybe like high rises, like, is there a certain archetype of a building that is particularly suited to green roofs?
I would say low mid-rise commercial residential.
Okay.
Once you get above 10 plus stories, I mean, the footprint normally shrinks and the cost goes, or the footprint shrinks, so the cost goes up. Low mid-rise, the ratio of roof space to mechanical, you get much more green, and it's simpler to implement.
Gotcha.
Hey,
All right.
Christian, there is a technical question that we got here, and it is, do you have to add soil amendments to ensure appropriate soil quality for plants?
Yes, typically, in some way, shape, or manner, maintenance would require, one part of maintenance would be adding fertilizer of some sort to make sure that the plants have the sufficient nutrition. Well, that varies from plant type and system type. What's required. So for example, we do soil testing on a somewhat regular basis across a selection of our green roofs that sort of mimic the portfolio of systems we work with, and then apply fertilizer based on manufacturer's recommendation and the soil testing to make sure that the roofs are healthy.
And then Christian, is there like the maintenance that you're doing, is there the requirement to do aeration on green roofs in the same way you would have to do it to keep it from getting compact? No, so
Nope.
there isn't that need for it.
I mean, I suppose if you're doing lawn on a roof,
Mhm.
some sort, maybe, but I mean, typically the growing medium is a bit engineered. It's not like topsoil, so it doesn't compact in the same way.
Okay.
But for extensive green roofs, no, it's weeding, ensuring that the debris isn't clogging your drains and you don't have any aggressive or invasive species,
Mhm.
and ensuring you're fertilizing, whether it's every year, every other year, every third year, depending on the green roof assembly, etc.
Excellent. And do you know if there is an average cost in general on maintenance for an average size mid-rise building? Is there like a maintenance kind of like, how you had the construction cost? Is there kind of like a range for maintenance costs?
I would say that maintenance is plus minus 50 cents a square foot a year. There's lots of projects that are 25 cents a square foot, and there's other projects that are $1 plus a square foot. But for a mid-range, yeah, 40-50 cents a square foot per year for 300 or 400 square meter project. It comes down to the biggest maintenance in and of itself is relatively simple. Often the biggest cost driver for us is access, negotiating, and travel time. So
Okay.
traveling to site, getting a key, etc., often takes longer than actually doing the maintenance on a lot of smaller sites in particular.
And then one other question, is there a difference in, like, let's say from a municipality perspective, if they put in a bylaw or it's part of their green standard, they have to do verification that it's actually achieving the outcomes they hope for. So based on that, do you find that is there a different requirement that would be associated with verification of performance versus prescriptive approaches? Like Toronto has both a performance and a prescriptive approach. Does the performance approach just add a little bit more challenges to the kind of verification?
That would apply primarily in the sort of approval of the building permit.
Mm-hmm.
Does this application meet the needs? And they've so the building inspectors or examiners need, I guess the examiners need to, have some familiarity with green roofs and be educated on what works, what doesn't. But they often rely on the liability of the design team.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
structural engineer, landscape architect have to sign off that these elements are going to happen or have
Been installed, and that's how they verify it often.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Now, from a achievable from a resource perspective is more one of the elements there is what resources do you as a municipality require to manage a program? For example, Denver, through a citizen-wide mandate, had a green roof bylaw that mandated or voted to approve a bylaw that mandated green roofs on all new and existing buildings. Then would have required, I think the analysis was 6 full-time staff to take care of that problem. When it came time to actually implementing that, they ended up negotiating a much more revised bylaw, and the staffing requirement for also that became much more realistic at the end as well. It was, the city was down to 1 full-time or less in order to handle the sort of the administrative side of that. The city of Toronto as well. I mean, the permit application, the building the examination of that. I don't know what the resource load is there, but in the city
That's
of
probably
Toronto,
where I will be
Shayna-
going next. Actually, I will be asking Shayna to join us and kind of share Toronto's journey on this and the
she would be.
requirements.
She's given numerous speeches at the industry conferences, and should be well suited for that. Like they have Shayna, and then Anne Marie Bainton is doing administration of the Eco Roof program.
Okay, perfect.
And so, like that.
I think Anne Marie's here.
No,
I saw her registered.
Marie.
By the way, we're
All right,
past
so we're-
2:00.
yeah, so
I'm sure Christian can stay though if people have questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I
yeah.
wanted to just kind of do a wrap up and just letting other people know this kind of next steps on this one. I know this is something that has been kind of starting to kind of come up to the surface on the to-do list for a number of municipalities. So probably one of the next steps after this one, I wanted to kind of get the technical understanding of what makes of appropriate kind of location for green roofs, some of the challenges and the questions that people had. Probably our next step is going to be getting City of Toronto to share a little bit about their journey on that one, and to also have Toronto share their technical requirements, because I know that's something that I've heard from municipalities that they haven't advanced the green roof bylaw because they are waiting for the province to send out technical requirements on the green roof bylaw that for the updates, and all municipalities have those authorities So that will be one of our next steps, is getting the Toronto story in terms of the resource, the process that they used for advancing their green roof, what they've learned thus far, and then get that in front of the municipalities as well. Christian, I want to thank you very much for coming and taking the time to give us a technical expertise on that one, because there were a lot of questions that municipalities had, and I was looking for how best to answer those questions. So I appreciate that. And I wanted to, sorry, go ahead.
Anytime.
Oh, excellent. And I probably might be coming back to you with additional questions as they come up, if that's okay. All right, perfect. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out the recording and the PDF of the presentation from Christian to all registrants. Please feel free to share that with others in your municipality who you think will be interested in that. And I'll keep you all in the loop on future conversations on green roofs, and in particular getting City of Toronto to share their journey. And if you have additional suggestions for what can help you advance the green roof conversation within your municipalities, please just let me know. Whatever kind of supports you need, we can kind of try and deal with them collectively, ideally, if we can. And then I want to thank everybody for joining the webinar and your interest in this. Thanks to Paul for helping me kind of find the right people to answer those technical questions. And thank you again, Christian, for taking the time to provide us the presentation and background on all things green roofs, but we're afraid to ask.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks
Gabby.
so much, everyone. Have
Thank
a
you,
great
Gabby.
day.
Have a good day.
Take care. Bye.